All right. So again, thanks everybody for your patience as we were getting on. We had just a few others join us. So as they're jumping on, just a little bit of background. So last week, well, hopefully everybody's had a great first week to start the school year. Though it's been warm in classrooms, but I think everything I'm hearing is things have gone super well. I just really appreciate you and the way that you welcome kids into classrooms this week. So last week, as we did our professional training, we did this session for our secondary teachers, but we had a hard time fitting it in for our elementary. We could have done it with 4 through 6, but that would have left K through third out of it. And we felt like it was important information for K through third to have as well. Some of the information hopefully will not be relevant, but just good things for you to be aware of with recent changes or changes this year from the legislature on things that we need to be mindful of, especially when it comes to the curriculum materials that we're using. So, with that brief explanation, I'm going to share my screen and slide deck for the day. So, 2 seconds here. Just made a copy of the slide deck, but let me see if this is in the right order. It is. Okay. Looks like I edited the wrong one. So, all right. So let me just check and see how we're doing with participants, see if we've had just a few others join in, but I think we're probably good to go. And like Jason said, we are reporting this. So as happens every legislative session, I had a handful of laws that bills that became laws that did impact things that we're doing in our schools and in our classrooms. The first one of those laws we want to talk about is our cell phone policy. We'll be pretty brief with this one. We spent a little bit more time with our secondary. But Jason, so what the law said is that school districts had to have a policy that restricted student use of cell phones or mobile devices in schools. Jason was asked to lead a committee on that. So he met with a committee of both teachers and parents from both the elementary and secondary school. And then they came together to draft the policy. And ultimately, that committee recommended a policy where in the elementary school, the devices would not be permitted while students are at school. Then in the secondary level, we would have a stoplight system to govern students' use of devices. So I'll probably just pause there now you've been in school for a week and see if anybody's had questions or concerns or how that policy implementation is going in your classrooms. Feel free to put things into the chat if you have a question you want to do there, or unmute yourselves and ask a question if anybody has a question or concern about that policy. Okay, I think we'll go, and if we do get questions, then we'll absolutely come back in it. So the second one that is a good one to be mindful of is a law that was passed that restricted what we can display in our flags and banners for people. And Elisa, just give me a heads up that our um, yeah, that it's choppy. So let me switch over. It looks like I'm still on my hotspot. So give me a second. I'm going to switch over to the district Wi-Fi and see if that's better. Elisa, thanks for the heads up. Okay, so how is the audio now? Is that still choppy or did that improve it as I switched over to the Wi-Fi? This is better. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Lisa. Um, so On displaying flags and banners, as I was saying with the choppy audio, that there was a law passed that restricted what we can display in schools and in classrooms when it comes to flags and banners. So a couple of, I think, important points about this one, and that is the purpose of this law, I think, is really important for us to read and for that to be our governing principle as we make decisions about what we display in our classrooms and in our schools. So the purpose statement from the law or from the bill says, in order to maintain a neutral and inclusive environment for all students, ensure that flags and banners displayed on public school property shall not promote political, religious, or ideological viewpoints. So that's very similar to the language we have and that we've had for years in our controversial issues in academic freedom policy. And that policy basically says that as we discuss and instruct on issues that could be considered controversial, we need to make sure that we are maintaining a neutral approach to that, that we're not trying to influence students to believe one way or the other on those issues. And so in that spirit, our classrooms should reflect that same neutral approach to what continue to be, I think, even more divisive topics and issues in our community, in our state, and in the country. So with that purpose statement in mind, then what the restriction says is no flags or banners that represent political, religious, or ideological views, including but not limited to political parties, race, gender, sexual orientation, or political ideologies may be displayed on public school property. So let me just hit those key points again. So what it says is we cannot display, I'd say, anything in our classrooms or in our schools that represent political, religious, or ideological views. So, as an example, I have a flag up here on this slide, the Don't Tread on Me flag. For those of you that teach U.S. history, and I know that that's a fairly limited subject in our elementary schools, more prevalent in our secondary schools, but that flag was an important symbol, and it has an important historical aspect when it comes to the Revolutionary War. But over the last 10 to 20 years, it's also become a symbol of political views, current political views. And so that would be a good example of a flag that shouldn't be permanently displayed in a classroom because of its political ideology right now. However, if I were teaching a unit on the Revolutionary War, I could absolutely share a picture of it. I could probably display it in my classroom as part of that instructional unit. But then when I was done with that unit on the Civil War, then it should not be remain in my classroom. So that was the law. And then this summer, the State Department provided a little bit, hopefully more clear guidance on this. The reason why the State Department guidance is especially important is in that statute, then the State Department is tasked with the responsibility to enforce this law. And that really happens after somebody's gone through the complaint process with it at the local school district level. So in her guidance that she shared with us, Debbie Critchfield, Debbie Critchfield, I've been doing this job too long, when I misquote the wrong state superintendent, will consider whether the displayed flag or banner illustrates or shows someone's opinions, emotions, beliefs, or thoughts regarding politics, economics, society, faith, or religion. Banners also includes posters. And so using a poster as an end around on this idea that it's a ban on flags and banners is not going to work. And then they'll also determine whether or not it qualifies for an exception because it's being used as a brief curriculum-based educational purpose. So we're going to talk a little bit more about Magic School here in a minute, but this summer we did adopt Magic School as a tool for both our teachers and students. And Jason and I have spent some time this summer trying to build some tools in there, some bots in there that we hope will be helpful to our teachers. And so one that I built last week to help with this is a flag and banner review. And so I built a short link to it, so you can just use that short link to get right to it. Or through Magic School, you can go to Enterprise Tools and you can find it there. But this allows you to upload any picture of any display or flag or banner, and it will do a review of the Idaho state law, the State Department's guidance, and board policy, and then it will give you back its opinion on whether or not it believes that that flag or banner or display would be in violation of this law. So it's not a, put it in there and you have to use this for everything in your classroom. But if you have a question about something in your classroom and you're not sure, it could certainly be helpful guidance to you. Um, so one particular banner that we need to talk about is this banner, and I think everybody knows that this created quite a bit of stir in the media, both at the state level and across the country this past spring. I think it's important to note that controversy around this flag happened before the legislature passed this law. So this was, at the time that it happened, this was solely focused on West Ada School District's policy and its enforcement of that policy. But since then, this has now needs to be considered not just in light of our policy, but in light of the state law. And the state attorney general has given a definitive opinion that this would be in violation of that law. And the reasons he cited for that is because it has a political ideology to it, a political backstory to it that goes back about 8 years, and it has a strong affiliation with the Democratic Party, as well as if I remember correctly, I think he said that he, in his interpretation, that using the multicolored letters is a reflection of ideological views when it comes to gender equity. So I might disagree with that opinion. You might disagree with that opinion. We might all say we think that's a bunch of hooey, but he is the current state official that's been elected to interpret laws and provide guidance on those laws. So really, his opinion holds sway, and that will dictate what the State Department of Education's actions are if they get complaints about this particular banner, and that is they'll find it's in violation. So that is going to hold true unless somebody challenges us all the way up to the state Supreme Court level. So at this time, I would say there is no question that if a teacher were to display this banner in their classroom and there was a complaint about that, the State Department would find that it's in violation of that law. And candidly, if it came to us, I think our hands are tied and we would probably have to abide by that opinion from the Attorney General as well. So recognizing that this has been a bit of a touch point, an emotional touch point for teachers, likely here in our district. I did have at least one teacher that emailed me about this. I definitely across the state, the teachers felt really strongly about this, and I get it. Like that statement is exactly how we want every kid to feel when they come into our classroom. We want kids to know that they are absolutely feel welcome. If we go back to our mission statement, we want every kid to know that and to feel safe, supported, and safe, connected, and cared for in our classrooms. So I think I have 2 points I want to make to that, and that is number one, what matters a whole lot more than anything we can put into our classrooms is how we actually treat students. And as I shared in our opening meetings, you've been doing a remarkable job with that, and it shows in our student engagement survey results and that incredible increase you've had in students reporting back. They do feel safe, connected, and cared for in our schools. So the way that we all interact with kids, the way that we respond to them, that is truly what's going to send kids the message that they're welcome in our classrooms much more than a sign does. But secondary to that is we do want students to know that and to visually communicate with them that we want them to feel safe, connected, and cared for, and all students are welcome in our school district. So to that end, Sam designed this poster for us. We have not presented this to the school board yet, but I think given the political controversy around this particular law and different banners and signs associated with it, I think it's in our best interest that we first present it to the school board and ask for their explicit approval of it. And then once they do that, if they do that, then we will make that available for any teachers that want to display that in their classrooms. And then, this is a great start, but if we may look at having students do some other iterations of it for classrooms as well. So that's a pretty important law to be aware of. I mean, I'm going to pause there and just see what questions people have about this particular issue. Okay, not seeing anything in the chat, not seeing anybody unmute. All right. Sounds like it might be Friday of Labor Day. You guys are ready to get home. So again, I'll keep going forward, but if anybody has a question and you want to pop it up in the chat or pause me or interrupt me as we're going forward, then feel free to do that. So the next set of laws, we got at least 3 different laws all about sex this legislative session. And I would imagine a lot of you are saying it's elementary school. For heaven's sake, Scott, we don't need to worry about that. And I hope that that's true. But just for the sake of everybody having the same information and you being really aware of what those restrictions are, I think is going to be important. So the three key changes, and again, these are all came in 3 different bills, and I don't know how much discussion or collaboration there was among the legislators with them because there's overlap between the bills. I wouldn't say there's really necessarily any discrepancy, well, maybe a little bit of discrepancy in them. So it's just been kind of a fun one for us to navigate, like it is every year. So the first one is that again, anything that qualifies as sex education, we have to have parental permission, written parental permission, at least 2 weeks prior. So this is a significant change in Idaho law. We've had an opt-out requirement in Idaho law for at least 8 to 10 years that says before we provide instruction, parents have to be notified that they have to be given an opportunity to opt their students out of it. This particular legislator who's been working on this for years finally got her bill through, and that says we now have to have actual affirmative parent permission for sex education. I'll talk about a little bit more about some of the challenges that come along with this bill in just a second. The second law, this is the second one, says that any classroom instruction on human biology, contraception, or sexually transmitted infection has to include 2 videos. One of them is a brief high-definition ultrasound of early fetal development. And the second one is a computer-generated animation of development from fertilization to birth. So the reason why this one concerns me and why I think it's an important one to be aware of at the elementary level is number one, the way the law is written is this applies to any school is the way that it's written with grades 5 through 12. So the law doesn't actually say that the instruction is grades 5 through 12. The way the law is actually written is any school that has 5 through 12. So I would say technically and from a strictly legal viewpoint, that law could apply to all the way from kindergarten through 12th grade. Don't hit the panic button because we're not going to ask our kindergarten teachers to show these videos. But it is just important to know what the law actually says. The other thing that super concerned me about it is this phrase, human biology, because that is not defined in state law. And so when I read that, I was like, that could have a lot of different interpretations on what human biology actually means. And to take it to an extreme level, my question was, if we're teaching kindergarten students head, shoulders, knees, and toes, does that count as human biology? So again, the law does not clearly define that term. So in our board policy, we did define it, and we made a clear distinction between what I would consider to be like general discussions about human bodies, like head, shoulders, knees, and toes, just some of those very general things, and human biology, which is where we would then be in the realm of discussing specific anatomical systems. If we're talking about the reproductive system, we're talking about um, the circulatory system, but it's really going to be a much more limited subject set that I would say we're hoping really applies only to like ADAT and phys. And then, of course, this will also apply into our health and wellness classes because they do discuss sexually transmitted infections and sometimes contraception and teen wellness starting in seventh grade. So I really believe that through policy, we've been able to keep this at that seventh through 12th grade level, but it is an important one for elementary teachers to know about because if you do get into that area of teaching human biology, then this would be a requirement that would have to go along with that instruction. So Steve Cheap just asked a first grade human body unit. And again, I really believe that with the way we've defined it in policy, this shouldn't I don't think elementary teachers are going to have to worry about it. We could certainly do a review of that CQLA first grade human body unit, but that is exactly the type of thing I was trying to protect our teachers and our kids from when we wrote our policy in response to this law. So, but just to be 100% clear on that, Jason and I can go through that first grade human body unit and make sure that we feel like it doesn't meet the definition of human biology, but it really is about a much more academically rigorous course than just introducing students to basic human body instruction. So thanks for the question, Steve. Okay. And then the third one is classroom instruction by public school personnel on sexual orientation or gender identity is prohibited. This one, again, I think it gets out of the three. I think this one's actually turned out to be maybe the most complicated to deal with. As we talked about this with our secondary teachers. And it's interesting the way I learned something this past week as I was working with our attorney in response to a number of the questions. The way this bill was originally drafted is it prohibited classroom instruction on sexual orientation or gender identity in grades K through 3, and then it permitted it in grades 4 through 6 as long as it was tied back to essential standards, to the state standards, and as long as we were doing the correct like parental notification and all those things. Somewhere in that bill process, it got changed and the K through 3rd turned to K through 12, but they still left that 4 provision in there. So it's a really confusing law to read as far as what we're really supposed to do. But our board policy basically says that this classroom instruction is not permitted. And the way we actually just did an update this week to that to recommend to the board. And so we are saying grades K through 5, and then grades 6 through 12, it's going to be with that parental notification and permission. And we did grade 6 because of a specific health content unit. Yeah.
The health content is the standards in health are 6 through 8 and K through 5.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're not saying teachers have to start teaching those health standards in grade 6, but that is where at the state level they go from grade 6 through 12. And so we wanted our policy to align to where those standards are. So okay, so coming back to that first one about human sexuality. So this is the one where if we were teaching content that meets the definition of human sexuality, we have to have parental permission. And one of the challenges with that law is these are all the different terms that are included as qualifying as human sexuality. And so some of them, as you can read, are very clearly, I would consider to be human sexuality. Other ones are not defined at all in statute, and they leave, again, a lot of room for interpretation. So I'll just pick on sexual attraction as an example. What does sexual attraction mean? So if I'm reading a book, trying to think of what's a good 4 through 6, so I'll just go Bridge to Terabithia. I don't know if that's part of ours or not. One of my favorite books in elementary school. So the fact that the protagonist Jess has a romantic interest and starts to develop a romantic interest in Leslie, does that qualify now as sexual attraction? And the law is completely unclear. Like there are no definitions at all for any of those terms in the law. So again, we spent our summer, part of our summer at least, defining these terms in our policy. So with sexual attraction, we really focused on this. This means that the individual is expressing sexual thoughts and desires for another individual. So really try to limit like what I would consider to be a fairly innocent romantic relationship or interest between characters and keep it to really discussions about sex, which I think is what the law intended. It's everybody's guess, but that's at least the way that we try to handle this through board policy. So, and again, you can see here's where some of that conflict between laws comes in because we have one law that says you can't teach anything about sexual or gender identity, and this law says that we can as long as we notify parents and have parental permission. So, just kind of a fun place for us to navigate in policy. But so our point is anything that you're teaching that would meet one of these definitions, you have to do that 2 weeks notice to parents, and you have to have parental permission back for every child that's going to participate in that instruction. And if you don't have parental permission back, then you have to provide an alternative learning activity to them that would not include any instruction that would be defined as human sexuality. So to help with this, so Kara has a question, so I'll circle back to that one in just a second. So to help with this, we built a bot again. Try not to call this our sex bot, but that's kind of how I'm somewhat affectionately referring to it. So in Magic School, that's policy. That's not the Magic School tool. So I'm just going to go to Magic School quick and grab that tool. Right, so again, here under Enterprise, you'll see here's our flags and banners review tool. And then here is our review of materials for human sexuality. And so and with this, again, it doesn't have the text of every single book. I'll just say that. But based on what it can learn about books from available sources out there on the web, it will give a review of that text that you're doing with students to determine whether or not it meets this definition. So I'm just going to type in the name of that book. And notice it says no parental. I'll let it scroll through and then scroll back up to the top. Okay, so it says under this assessment, no parental permission is required. It does not include explicit content related to any of those things we just talked about. Does not contain anything on sexual orientation or gender identity. Okay, it does say, okay, it gives kind of the summary of the content and says it doesn't require any notification. I don't know that we're doing the giver in elementary. The giver was one of the ones that we reviewed last week with our secondary, but just as a contrast to that, I'll type in the giver. And okay, so the AI tool reviews that, and it says it's a dystopian novel, and then it identifies that Jonas is experiencing stirrings, which are sexual feelings, takes pills to suppress them, has references to sexual pleasure and physical sensations, explicit discussion of sexual dreams and physical arousal. So this one does require parental consent at least 2 weeks prior. It provides you with some language that you can send to parents about that, so you don't have to worry about coming up with your own language. That language includes the links for them to review the learning materials if they wish to. It also gives them a link to request an alternative assignment or learning activity for kids instead. So then you can continue to interact with that. So I do think that this is a helpful tool. Again, I wouldn't say it's perfect. I think what it does is it provides you with good information that you can then make a professional judgment about that particular book or content with your principal, And if there's ever a question and it's unclear, please feel free to reach out to Jason or to me. And if we're not sure, then we'll review it with our attorney. So I appreciate some of the things that have been shared about the second grade CKLA unit. Looks like it does have some uses the vocabulary of anus and rectum. Talks about chicken reproduction and how it's similar to all living things. So we may have to do a deeper dive on that particular unit. So chicken reproduction. I'll focus on one key thing, and that is chicken reproduction is not human sexuality. So that is one really key statement. Is these laws are very specific to human sexuality, not to sexuality in general. So if that CKLA unit stays focused on chickens, it's going to be okay. But as soon as you cross into human sexuality, we need to take a much closer look at it. And to answer Kara, your question, I still don't think that I don't think using specific biology terms like anus or rectum, to me, that's no different than elbow or forehead or toes. We're still not into that realm of human biology. So I know it's not like can give you like a super clear where that line is, but I would say it really is an in-depth study of the human body is what's going to qualify as human biology. And I would say, based on our definition, it was really written with the intent that Anat and Phys at the high school level is really the one course that probably meets that definition. I don't even think our sophomore biology class does, but I probably have to look at that more closely. Okay. What other questions do you have about sex? You thought this is going to be a boring meeting.
I was just going to clarify your question. Educationally and what we're doing in our schools.
Yes. Okay, I'm not seeing anything else pop up in the chat. I'm not hearing any questions from anybody, so I'll go forward. But if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. So there's our QR code for the bot to review things. So our recommendations, first one would be to anything you have a question about, go ahead and throw it through that content review tool. If there are things in CKLA that would be available for the bot to receive that you could either print or screenshot or anything like that, then that would be helpful to make an informed judgment about those. That bot will help you determine whether or not it's going to qualify as instruction in human sexuality. It does require parental permission. And what we talked about is with our secondary teachers is including that in their syllabuses. For elementary, I don't know that that's super helpful, but I would, just as you know you're coming up to that unit, know that at least 2 weeks before that, you've got to notify parents. I'd also appreciate us knowing so that we're fully apprised of where that might be helping in the elementary level. So, and then be ready to have alternative learning activities for students who don't have parental consent. So I think those are the key things we wanted to talk about. I'm just going to skip quickly through these ones just in the interest of you getting to your Fridays. But I did want to just talk about our changes with vets. So as we were updating our policy for teacher evaluations, which we were required to do as we pivoted from JPAS to the BEST model, we went back and we reviewed our policy. We had different questions from teachers about process and procedure. So it was just a good time to take a good fresh look at that. And one of the things that immediately kind of jumped out to Heath and me is that we had not really been in compliance with the state law when it comes to advancing on the career ladder. So just maybe for some context, we started with our JPAS evaluation system before there was ever a single word written in state law about teacher evaluations. And then somewhere around 2011, 2012, 2013, somewhere in that time frame is where the state got their hands on to teacher evaluations and started putting things into place with state laws with teacher evaluations. So one of those laws that came into place in rules was that teachers had to be evaluated every year, and they had to have a minimum of 2 classroom observations, and one of those had to be before January 1st. So we've had that for the last 12 to 13 years. So as we looked at what we're doing with JPass, and we were allowing teachers to be evaluated every 3 years, we were doing documented walkthrough observations in those odd years to meet that requirement of teachers having a classroom observation at least twice a year and once before January 1st. And that really did satisfy that law and that rule. I have no issue at all with what we were doing with that. The problem comes with as we skip ahead about 8 years, and the state adopted the career ladder. That career ladder legislation said that to advance on the career ladder, teachers had to meet criteria for 3 of the past 5 years. So to move into it's a little bit different, but so I'll be more articulate. To move into the residential rungs, you had to meet the criteria 2 of the past 3 years or in the third year. To move into the advanced professional, which happened about 3 or 4, is actually 5 years after the start of the career ladder, is when they added the advanced professional rungs. And to move into those, you had to meet the criteria 3 of the past 5 years. Well, with us doing an evaluation and the teacher meeting that once, and then not having another evaluation for 3 years, but us holding that first evaluation as their official evaluation, that was not really satisfying the intent of the law, which is teachers are meeting this criteria at least 3 of the 5 years. So we recognized that as we did that review of our policy. And that's what led us to say, starting this year, we have to go back to our original practice, which is what we had with JPass, of evaluating every teacher every year. Again, that will make sure that we are truly meeting all aspects of state laws, as many different ones as there are when it comes to teacher evaluations and advancing on the career ladder. So that's one pretty significant change. So every certified employee will receive a full evaluation every year. And then the other change, this one I think is just an improvement. It doesn't really change anything for teachers. But again, using Magic School, I was able to build a bot that principals could take that quantitative data from their observations, copy and paste it into Magic School, and it will kick out, I think, a much more helpful qualitative feedback report than you got last year. And I think it's even more helpful than the JPass ones because it really is much more tailored to specifically what the teacher saw in your classroom. So I think that'll be helpful for you with your IPLPs. It'll really identify the things that are going well in your classroom. It'll identify the areas or suggestions on ways that you could improve in the classroom. It's going to be a much more helpful feedback report than you had last year. So I'm excited about that tool for teachers. So just to wrap up with BEST, we just wanted to do a quick high-level overview of the results from last year. So in classroom environment domain, you can see that 76% of our teachers were highly effective and 22% were effective. And then that left us just around 2% that were either minimally effective or not effective. And then in classroom instruction use of assessment, it was about a 50-50 split, with 97% being either highly effective or effective. So just like we talked about last August, the switch to BEST really did not impact anybody negatively as far as moving towards the career ladder. Probably the one thing that might have been a bit of a tripping point is, in addition to that overall criteria that you either have to be highly effective in either instruction and use of assessment or in classroom management to move into the advanced professional rungs, you also can't have any single components that are marked as either basic or unsatisfactory. So we did have a few teachers that initially might have gotten tripped up on that one component part of it, and that one component wasn't hitting the criteria. But Heath worked with principals. We set up a plan to improve in that area and for principals to monitor that through walkthroughs. And then for those teachers that were able to show improvement on those components, we were able to update their scores so that didn't keep them from advancing on the curve. Anything else you want to add to that, Heath?
That's good.
So overall, just like we promised last year, overall, we reported fewer teachers to the state as being highly effective. Because again, with the way that we did the final evaluations is you had to be highly effective in instruction and use of assessment. So it's now less than half of our teachers were meeting that criteria to be highly effective, but we still had the vast majority were either meeting it in instruction and use of assessment, it's about 85%, or in classroom environment, which is very similar to what we had back with JPass. So nobody was adversely impacted on movement on the career ladder, but overall reports did decrease the percentage of our teachers that were reported as highly effective, and then conversely increase the number of teachers that were reported as effective. So all in all, I feel like things went just like we had intended them to with our best evaluation. So that's all that we had. I am going to stay on and I'll just take questions about any of the things that we talked about, or if there's anything else at all out there that's on your mind, you just want a chance to fire away, then more than happy to stay on and answer those questions. If you're done and we've got all your questions answered, have a fantastic Labor Day weekend. It's well deserved.
Before you go, I've had questions about the access to Amplify. I had hoped that we would have it by now, and I think we may. I just haven't received any email, and so I asked Julie if we should have received emails, and she said, "Well, I would hope so." But I went to Amplify login, logged in using Google, and it looks like I have access. I just don't know what it should look like. So if you want to try going to Amplify login and then using your sign in with Google and see if that gets you in, then we should be good. I'm still waiting to hear back from the email that I sent to see if we are in, but I would try that. Because they had told us that we wouldn't receive an email, but I haven't received anything. I'm looking in my junk email right now, and I don't see anything. But Julie just texted me and said go to class.
Yeah. So we didn't get any emails from Amplify, but we did get access through the class.
I hadn't seen it in class link, and I wonder if they just didn't put that in mine. Okay, good, thank you.
And then Tina says you can log off of the Amplify login. You'll have to change your password. It wasn't on class for her.
Julie says it won't be in admin, but it will be in teachers.
So we probably have to add that for admin.
Yep.
We'll work with tech to get that added for admin. Oh, so Tina's saying you can log in from the Amplify login page. You'll have to change your password, and it wasn't there for ClassLink. But we will work on the ClassLink part for principals.
Julie said that, yeah, I'll talk to Julie about the admin portion of it.
Oh, this is a great question. So I hope everybody's still hanging on for just a minute. I appreciate questions coming in. And this is a super helpful one because I think if you read my newsletter last spring, I probably communicated information that changed since then. So the question is a quick question about flags being displayed. We were told displaying an alma mater from a religious school is no longer allowed, but from a state school is okay. That seems to violate freedom of speech laws. Can you speak to that? So what I would say is the original bill that was drafted, that was communicated to us, it did include, I'll just say the law was written differently, period. And so the way that law was written did change. So the final bill that was changed, it does not speak to university flags at all. So I believe that university flags are okay. Professional sports teams flags that again in the original draft of the bill would have been prohibited, they're now not prohibited is a way to say that. So essentially the way the law changed last spring in the early drafts that we saw, it was all flags are banned except for, and then it had a very short list of except fors. When the bill actually went through and got passed, it was those statements that I shared with you that the listed here are definite exceptions to that prohibition. But then there's this other area that we're now in our professional judgment as to whether or not that would be permissible or not. So university flags are not prohibited, either private or public. Again, public sports teams are not prohibited one way or the other. But I would just go back to that original statement that what we don't want to do is display a flag. And that's actually probably a really good one to point out is I'm going to go back to that language super quick because I think it's an important question. So what, because I probably need to add one clarification to what I just said. Okay. So number two, the exact wording from the law says no flags or banners that represent political, religious, or ideological views. So just for the heck of it, I did put in a BYU pennant into our chatbot, and it came back and it said this could be a violation because of the direct affiliation with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I put in USC's flag, and it came back, and USC that once upon a time was religious but no longer is. It's just private. It said it was fine. So I think it's going to be a judgment call. Debbie Critchfield said she didn't think university flags would be in violation. The truth is, some of those questions we won't know unless we get a complaint and somebody reviews that complaint and makes a determination. But for now, I am not going to tell anybody you need to take down any university flags or banners, but I can't promise that if you get a complaint about them, that might be a different answer. Okay, great question. Thank you for asking that. Anybody else have a question? Still got 7 minutes to 3. Okay, if not, like I said, you're free to head out and have a great Labor Day weekend. Enjoy the sunshine. Enjoy some downtime after a pretty intense last couple weeks.
A short, long week.
Yep. But I will stick around for anybody that wants to stick around and ask any questions.